thanks so much for doing this. So the article that I'm going to write based on this interview is going to be the feature article for December. So the December issue is all about goal setting. I fell across your channel on YouTube, which is really brilliant. I literally just started last week from video 1 and I'm watching all the way through.
Oh, nice.
It is so good, really good. I want to know a bit more about how you got into this. I know that you are, let me just see that you have a master in transformational leadership. Mm-hmm. You run the Better Faster Academy and you're doing the Gallup Strength Assessment, which I've just signed up for. I'm going to do that next.
Oh, nice.
So really fabulous. But how did you get into that? How did you get into coaching?
I started off early on. I think I've been a writer since I was a kid and I wanted to become a professional writer at one point. Like I went and did part of an MFA. And so I was definitely in the English writing, etc. And I got super interested in psychology and leadership. I had to take the strengths assessment when I went to grad school for the first time, like along with Myers-Briggs and 40 other tests at the same time. And they did this thing with us where, because of the program I was going into, you sat down with somebody who was an expert in each one of the assessments, and they talked to you about what your results meant in terms of like how you would acclimate to graduate school and what would be best for you. And the strengths test literally changed my life. Like I've never had an experience like this before where like I grew up in a household where my 3 family members were all very similar to each other and I was the different one. So I was like always trying to figure out like why my mom and my dad are very similar and they're very successful in the same ways in their respective fields. And I kept trying to motivate myself the way that they would motivate themselves. And it just never worked. Like I couldn't ever hit what I felt was my potential. And so anyway, I went through this coaching and my coach basically sat down and was like, oh, you're just doing it the wrong way for you. And in my head, I had always known that's one of my personality traits, to be individualized for people. And he gave me this language to explain why when I do this, it doesn't work, but when I do that, it works, even though my parents would say that was the wrong way to do it. And you should do it this way, because that's how they're all motivated. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. So I started trying to work with my strengths and I just got obsessed. Like I couldn't stop learning about it. I immediately went to Gallup and got certified, like as soon as I possibly could, the next plane that I could get on. Wow. And I just started coaching everyone that I could get my hands on. And I was building a business, doing coaching, and I was in grad school and I was running a nonprofit at the same time. And so I was just hitting my stride. And then the recession hit. And it really derailed everything that I was doing. And so I went back and I got a full-time stable job and started building my coaching expertise on the side, just doing it for friends and whatever. Right. And then I started writing again, like fiction writing again at that time, because I needed an escape. And I really stopped coaching for a while because I had this full-time job and I was still finishing my master's degree. Anyway, this is a long story, but essentially I started writing full-time fiction in about 2012, 2013.
Right.
And I stopped doing all the like professional style coaching. But then I found that I was coaching my friends, my writer friends, because many of them had never had the experience of like HR coaching, like that stuff you get if you work in a company to try to help yourself be better at what you do for your job. Most of them had never experienced that because they were all like professional writers. And so I found myself coaching writers just for fun, and then started teaching a class for Margie Lawson that just took off because it was based on all this success alignment stuff that I had master's degree in. And so it was like I had all this background already. I had all this experience. Like when I first started coaching writers, I'd already been coaching strengths for 8 years. Like I had a really solid base of people that I'd already coached. And anyway, it was a very serendipitous, weird confluence of events. And about 4 years ago, I basically switched from writing fiction to doing this, like doing nonfiction and coaching full time. So It's been a weird journey.
Seriously, but you're so lucky to find something that fulfills you. That's amazing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
But
love strengths.
yeah, God, I'd be so tempted to talk to you about that. But you are writing cozy mysteries.
Yes. So I still have been trying to write fiction on the side. I was
Mhm.
better fitting the time in when I first started teaching this class, 2015 to about 2018. I was still writing fairly full time. Like I was writing some romance at the time, and then I
Right.
had a mystery name, and now had to stop a little bit for the 2 years that we were really super growing fast, just to respond to the nonfiction need that was there, which I just didn't realize how big the need was because it's so
Mm.
in my bones. Like I was telling somebody yesterday, I talk to people on the airplane about this.
Yeah.
Like when somebody is saying, oh, hey, this is hard for me, they're relaying their
Mm.
struggles. And I'm like, well, have you ever tried just not doing that? Because it's like I just can't not talk about this success alignment stuff
Yeah.
everywhere. But I try to keep doing fiction because it's what I love. It's what fills me. And I have a mystery pen name. I have another pen name now that's doing paranormal mystery. And
Oh,
then
wow.
I probably will continue to do contemporary mystery as well on the
Yeah.
side.
My goodness, you've got a lot on your plate.
Yes, yes. And that's one of my strengths,
Seriously.
right? Like I have a strength
Mhm.
called achiever, and it just is that desire to constantly fill my time. Like I've never only had one job in my entire life. I always have a full-time job and then a volunteer job, or like I said, like I ran a nonprofit for many years and I was also
Mm.
doing other stuff on the side. It's just the way that I'm built
Yeah.
to want to do all the things.
I was so fascinated. I think it was in the second video on your YouTube channel where you said that you had no you had no empathy.
Right, zero. Yeah.
I thought at first I was like, okay, that's a bit weird. Like, what is she, a sociopath? And then I thought,
Yeah.
no, actually, that's perfect for coaching because
It's so good. Yeah.
you don't
Because,
take
like,
the burden.
yes, if you ever go through a psychology degree to become a licensed therapist, they teach you how to have professional distance from your clients
Yeah.
and to build all these skills
Mm.
essentially to try to help you not take everything home. And
Yeah.
so I always say, like, I have really low empathy. It's 31 out of 34 in the strengths,
Mm.
but my empathetic or sympatheticness or like kindness comes from a
Mm.
different place. For me, it doesn't
Right.
come from empathy. The handy part about that is some days I coach 10 or 12 hours a day. And
Yeah. Yeah.
especially during the pandemic, people are just terrified about their businesses and scared about uncertainty. And I can pretty much sit with that. Not that it doesn't ever
Mm.
wear on me, but I can sit with that. Whereas like somebody with high empathy is going to have to like clear all of that out of them all the time. And I
Yeah.
can just be very moved and compassionate and
Mm.
also not take any of it on to my body or
Yeah.
into my spirit, which is helpful for me at least, but
Yeah.
it has
And
its
now we're
downsides.
talking. Yeah, but now we're talking about the strengths, which I didn't
Right.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So fascinating. It's so interesting. Okay, let's go back to your writing process. Like when you do your fiction writing, tell me about your process from the moment you get the spark of an idea. How do you get it on the page? Are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? How do you do it?
Yeah, I'm not a plotter. I tried for a long time to plot, like a lot of us, right? I had heard just very early on in my writing career, especially having gone like to graduate school for writing for a while, did not finish MFA because I just
Mm.
couldn't force myself to do things the way that
Yeah.
they wanted us to do them. It just wasn't in me. But I learned this whole there's a structure, there's a format, like you have to do it this way. And it was so funny. I was listening to Damon Suede talk once about Aristotle's dramatics, I think, where he talks about how he figured out the 3 act structure basically by watching a whole bunch of plays in ancient
Right.
Greece. And I was like, who wrote those plays? Because if they
Mhm.
didn't know about the 3 act structure, then like they were doing it without knowing they were doing it. But
Mm.
clearly, there was so much natural storytelling capacity in them, so much natural ability that they were basically what we would call pantsing on some
Yeah.
level, right? Not outlining all these amazing plays that made Aristotle so compelled to study them because their structure was so good. And if other people can do it naturally, why couldn't I do it naturally? And so I literally just stopped outlining and just let myself go. And because that autopilot computer exists in our head, of we've watched so many thousands of movies and read so many thousands of books, we know what compelling story structure looks like. Not everyone needs to be aware of what they're doing when
But
they.
how do you do that with cozy mystery? Because obviously you're building up a mystery and there has to be red herrings and distractions and God knows what. Do you go
Yeah.
and layer that in afterwards? How do you do that?
No, I have to talk about the strength of strategic because it's right. Like it's the only way I can explain it. So one of my top 5 strengths, talents, is called strategic. And it's essentially like standing in one spot and being able to look forward in 5 or 10 or 50 different directions and see several moves ahead. So like when I'm starting the book, I can see in my head, like if she goes forward here, that won't work. Oh, that's not a good clue. Like I can see so far ahead, and my brain is making all of those connections. Like I literally never know what's going to happen when I write a book. Like
Wow.
I just don't know. It's so hard to explain without explaining strategic, because what I want to say is I don't know how I do it. And I think that's why a lot of us who are pantsers, but I don't like the term pantsing, I call it discovery plotting, because every book has plot. It's just I discover my plot as I'm writing, where other people structure and create their plot before they write. And both of them are valid and they both work. It's just
Yeah.
that I don't have the capacity to do it that other way. And what fascinates me about it is I will look back at my stories and think, oh, that was so cool. Like that I put that knife on that table and didn't even know that until chapter 25 that they would need to have that knife on that table. And I literally just instinctively put the knife on the table and had no plan for it whatsoever, other than just knowing I have to trust my gut, because
Yeah.
it gets me through books. So in my process, I almost always start with an idea of something that is at the very beginning of the book. Oh, wouldn't it be cool if there was an actor who came into town and he was having a secret meeting with a banker, and then she happens to steer him in the wrong direction, and then somebody dies. Literally, that's the whole thought that I had about the beginning of my first cozy. And then I just jumped into the story and then followed the story wherever it went. And I would come across people and I'd be like, oh, that's the killer. Totally, that's the killer. And then we'd get 5 chapters or 6 chapters in, and then they would die. And I'd be like, I guess that wasn't the killer. So who else could it have been? And then write 5 or 6 more chapters. And then the person that I thought was the killer that time gets proven that they weren't. And so then by the time I get to the end, like at about 60%, I would say I usually know how the ending is going to happen.
Okay.
But I don't know ever at the beginning. And in fact, I tried to structure my plot for cozies one time and it did not work out well. It's the worst cozy that I've written. And then I stopped. I'm like, nope, I'm going to go back to the other way, because I got to trust my strategic. It is my top talent. Just let it do what it's going to do.
Right.
And yeah, so my process, I don't recommend it for anyone unless that's like what you're wired for. But because it is if you are an outliner and you need to know what happens in order to start writing, doing it the way I do it is going to mess you up.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think I'm the exact opposite of you. I just plot everything. Doesn't mean I can't veer off, but I need the safety net where I'm going. But did you pay for that at the end with editing?
No, not usually. So
Wow.
what usually happens is I get about 75% through or 65% through. And then I'm like, oh, I need to go hide this thing that I thought this person wasn't the real killer. So I was pretty obvious about how bad of a person they were when you first meet them, because I thought they were red herring. And then I have to go back and rewrite when you first meet them and then maybe go through. But my editor does this though. She goes through and she's always, oh, you had them show up here and they're not supposed to be there. And then I have to go back and edit that one piece out. But usually for the most part, the strategic is so anticipatory that it just can see from the beginning in a way that I think it knows. If I could say it was an autopilot computer, I think on some level it knows what it's doing. And Becca, the conscious Becca, does not.
Oh, that
And
is so
so
cool.
I'm along for the ride with this
Oh,
story.
excellent.
It's
So
great.
are you one of these people who can look at themselves in the mirror and not say anything, but have an entire dialogue running in their
Yeah.
head?
Oh, yeah.
I don't. I'm just, there's nothing there. Yeah.
So do you not
My
see
fingers and
pictures
mouth.
then?
Nope.
Oh, interesting.
No.
That's really fascinating.
It's
Yeah.
like meditation for me is really easy because there's nothing between the ears.
Oh, that's fascinating. That makes a lot of sense, though, why outlining would be the best for you,
Mhm.
because then you're essentially doing the same thing that I'm doing. It's
Yeah,
just you do it at a different time in the story. Um,
exactly.
yeah, that's
Exactly.
super cool. I
It's,
love that.
isn't that fascinating?
I love how different we all are.
Oh, I know. So let's see. Oh, yeah, goal setting. That is the topic of the December issue.
Right.
Do you actually, okay, this is really interesting because you're an intuitive plotter, let's say. Do you apply that same thing for your business planning? Have you already planned out 2022 or do you have a business plan? I'm writing these books.
Because of other strengths that I have, the strategic
Mhm.
also plays into this. My plotting or like goal setting business wise is always in my head anyway. Like I can put it down on paper, that's fine. But so much of it is like intuitive in my head that I just
Mhm.
follow my intuition. And I say, like, I am a bad person to ask to do talks about this kind of stuff because what I'm
Mhm.
constantly saying, which does apply to about 30% of people, so it's not no one will benefit from it. But what I always say is, I know in my heart what is right for me to do and what is not. And I just do the things that are right for me to do. And I don't
Right.
do the things that are not right. And I have a very strong check when it's something that
Mhm.
is like bad for me. And even when it seems like the smartest idea, for example, I have no evergreen classes in my nonfiction platform.
Okay.
Every single class is you get coached by a person. And
Mhm.
that is the exact opposite of what literally every business person tells
Mhm.
you ever if they're telling you how to set up your business. And every time I did a consult with someone and they would say, evergreen, you got to have a great evergreen class. And I was like, but evergreen classes, they only work for the bell curve. They only work for
Mhm.
68% of people. What about the 32% that are not getting helped by those evergreen classes? And they're like, yeah, they don't matter. Those aren't your people. And I'm like, they are my people. So we're not going to do evergreen content. We're going to do all coach content.
Yeah.
And it so goes against best practice to do that, that I would literally get phone calls from these coaches who I had met with, and they'd be like, Becca, you can't do this. You're never going to make any money ever doing this. And they would try to convince me out of it, but I just had this check. So I've learned in my lifetime, listen to the signs that are there internally for myself, because I
Mhm.
know the way that my brain works and the way that a lot of our brains work
Yeah.
is I'm reading data very quickly when I look at patterns for stuff because I'm always pattern watching. And
Mhm.
so I see things subconsciously sometimes that my conscious brain does not know. And I
Mhm.
just know things. And that is so hard to explain to like other people who are questioning my decision making process. And I have
Right.
to say, I have to trust myself because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's been pretty good so far. So I'm just going to trust my inner pattern watcher and let myself make those choices. And I'm not a goal setter. Like by
Mhm.
nature, I don't set goals for myself at all in terms of the way that you would typically do like a business plan and have all this,
Mhm.
stuff. But that's because I know I'm so internally motivated that I'm going to
Yeah.
work all the time.
Mhm.
So I don't need goals to motivate me. They don't actually do anything for me. So when people are all like, oh, what's your 10-year goal plan or whatever, I'm like, being alive. Like I want to be alive and writing. So those are like, that's what I'm aiming for. Everything else, whatever happens, is going to be fine. and I'm
Yeah.
going to be happy no matter what. So I'm not going to try to manipulate my future too much, because I feel like every time I try to set a goal and force myself to do something that seems like the right option because everybody else is doing it that way, it
Mm.
literally never works out for me. And sometimes it's so disastrous that it actually like ruins plans that I should have been
Mhm.
making. So I've just learned, don't set goals, Becca. That's not your mode.
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of bravery to actually say that out loud, because so many people at the moment are so business focused. I've got writer friends who got, yeah, I gotta write 10 books next year. I don't know how I'm gonna do it. I'm totally stressed out. I'm having no fun. I'm going like, you may as well sit at a cash till at a supermarket.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is left if we have no fun in doing this?
And those of us who are wired to enjoy the work so much, I think
Mm.
like I enjoy the work, and I also know when I am and am not good at. So like I don't do stuff. And this is one of the benefits of strengths, I think, over time. I've been
Mm.
doing this for 16 years.
Right.
So in my DNA now, I think at this point is the mantra of, if you're not good at it, don't do it. I just don't
Yeah.
do stuff that I'm not good at. I either delegate it like to someone else, pay somebody else to do it, or find someone else who's better at it than I am.
Mm.
Or I literally just don't do some things, because I am a huge proponent of, just because everyone tells you you should doesn't mean you should, because
Yeah.
most people don't actually know if what they're saying works for everyone anyway. And so you can
Mm.
just ignore, like all the shoulding, especially if it's
Yeah.
not working for you. But again, I know that's my personality, and I get that not everybody can do that, but I'm just such a huge fan of like, only do what works for you and only do what you have to, that I would never force myself to set goals if it didn't work for me. But I would also not set goals if it did
Mm.
work. Like that, I
Yeah.
would do it because my mom does that. She's a champion goal setter, and
Mm.
I'm just not. Like, I don't,
Yeah.
smart goals mean nothing to me.
That's fascinating. Final question. What is your number one advice for new writers starting out?
Oh boy, that's hard.
Yeah, apologies for the wide question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question though. So I'm going to do two, just because I think
Mhm.
one is probably what everyone would say, which is, don't worry about it. Like, write, publish, you know what I mean? Every
Yeah.
single time I talk to, and I coach authors who have written hundreds of books and hit number one New York Times. And
Mm.
every single time we talk about this, what would you say to new authors? It's like, the view from 100 books is so different than the view from one. And every single person that I talk to is, I wish I had just moved faster at the beginning of my career and not
Yeah.
worried and not been quite so precious, because there was so much I needed to learn. And I would say a similar thing. Like, I piano student since I've been 2.5 years old.
Right.
And I spent the first 15 years of my piano career learning how to be an excellent pianist, even though I was
Mhm.
talented, right? Like, I was talented from the beginning. But
Mm.
there's so much about the way that you personally execute craft that you have to learn. And the only way to learn it is by iteration.
Yeah.
And so this idea that we have to like wait until everything is perfectly ready, or until I don't feel scared anymore. And my feedback would be, you're going to feel scared all the time. You're going to get to 100 books and still feel scared. So you're always going to publish scared. All of us do. So just go ahead and do it scared, right? That's my feeling. But the other piece though is, I would always question the premise of everything you hear from
Mm.
experts, like
Yeah.
everything. And the experts are not the problem. Experts should do exactly what they're doing, right? Like, they should tell us what worked for them and what they think works for other people. But the bottom line truth is, and this is a metric, a success metric that just exists in the world,
Yeah.
nothing works for everyone. Not every day doesn't work for everyone.
Mm.
Don't edit as you go doesn't work for everyone. Like, all of these, like dictation doesn't work for everyone. And it's not a matter of just suck it up and get through it because the first threshold is hard. There literally are talents that make us unable to do certain things. And when you continue to do something and push yourself to try these things that aren't working for you and you're never having success, the danger is that you'll say, I'm broken, I'm wrong, instead of just saying, like I said to the person on the plane, have you ever tried just not doing that? That's the advice that I would give to literally everyone. If you keep trying to pants because your favorite writer is a pantser, but you're like, you are like, I would rather know everything that's going to happen than outline. Like it's okay. Like I've coached more than 5,000 individual one-on-one authors.
Wow.
And I can tell you with certainty that there is no pattern for success that exists about the shoulds. Every single should rule that there is, I can point to people that I've coached who are successful who don't do that thing. Every single should rule that exists. So when you're looking at the whole, like you have to outline to get faster, or don't edit as you go, or stop thinking, or write slower because you're writing crappy books if you write too fast or whatever, there is literally someone right now, and probably multiple someones, making 6 and 7 figures who are doing exactly what you're doing. And they are successful at it because they're just letting themselves be who they naturally successfully are. And they're not trying to fit themselves into a mold of what someone else's success pattern looks like. So there's 34 strengths. You have a top 5, and those are the 5 strongest things about you. There are 378,000 different combinations that you could possibly have. So if you think of that many differences of how you could potentially be successful, that means that you're not likely to even know another person who's going to be successful in the exact same way that you are.
Wow.
So all the forcing ourselves to be like other people and assuming that we're broken and there's something wrong with us is literally killing some of us. And I just want new writers to free themselves up from this expectation that there is some kind of best practice out there, that if I force myself into the best practice, that I'm just going to make $1 million. And Becca comes along and is, oh, question that premise all over the place, because that's not true. So that's probably the thing that I would say.
Yeah, that is brilliant. I've only got 1,200 words for that article, Becca. I don't know how I'm going to put so much wisdom in there. That was fantastic. Well, listen, thank you so much for giving me so much of your time.
Yeah.
And the insights. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're welcome. And have you taken the strengths test yet?
No, I haven't. I actually just sent off the little form thingy that
the request.
The request. I sent that off last night. So
if you think about it, when you get your results, just send me your top 5 through that messenger that we had. I would love to hear what they are.
Oof, that'll be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And I also just talking to my husband now, because I would really be part of your coaching program.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we love it. I coach fewer new people than I used to, because now we have a whole bunch of other coaches on staff,
right?
All of whom, and I'm super psyched about this, all the ones who coach our authors are also authors, which is really exciting. And so when you get coached by somebody, you actually get coached by somebody who is an author, unless you're doing our corporate stuff. And then we have corporate people for that. But what's interesting about the experience of growing this is that we have developed some real specialties with our coaches. Like we have some people who are really good with these particular strengths, or that combo, or this combo. And because we see such a high volume of people, we see such a repetition of those traits, that we have some people who are super specialists in intellection activator or input learner or whatever. And so we have an opportunity to get really granular with people, which is what I think is the best way for having success, is to have that really specific idea of who I am and what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, and what can I do more of and be better at that.
Yeah, I absolutely can't wait, because I know obviously I'm a German speaker, I'm native German, so I have really good language skills, and I've got super Google free. If you want anything, I can find it in a couple of seconds.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, no, that's definitely a talent. In fact, Like when I talk in, like when I give public speeches about strengths, we always do this experiment where it's raise your hand if you always do this behavior. And then we watch people's hands shoot up, and then half the room is like, that's the worst ever. Why would you do that? That's so stupid. So like when we do this, one of them is raise your hand if you always have to Google everything the moment that you become curious about it. And then you have people who are just like, oh yes, this is me. And then when people start making comments about how much that annoys them, I'm like, yes, this is why knowing your strengths is important, because there's a good chance that the two of you are married to each other, that one of you is a great Googler and the other one is the anti-Googler. And you need to understand why you're doing this so that you don't judge each other. Because like, when your number one talent is something like what you might have, it's the first instinct that you have. It's the way that you think about everything. So you can't even imagine people who wouldn't have that first instinct. Like, how can you not? It's what I've always done. But then when you have someone who like, that's their number 34, like that is the most fascinating conversation ever, because you'll say the thing that's your number one instinct and they'll say things like, I've never even thought that one time in my life. Like I would never even consider that would be an option. And so when they come to you and ask you to Google something for them, the Googler's first thought is, how could you not just Google that yourself, bro? What's wrong with you? When in reality, it's because it's their last instinct, like their very last instinct. Yeah.
I mean, my family put me on a digital diet for all of 6 hours before I caved, because I was like, every couple of seconds, I was like, where's my phone? I need to look this up. I felt like from the combined knowledge of all mankind, I was just blind and deaf and I had no access. If the aliens ever invade and they blip out the internet, I am screwed.
Yes, you'll have to live in the library. Like you'll have to go live in the library.
It's like in the bad old days with encyclopedias from 1966. All right. But I let you go. That was totally hilarious. Loved it.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Well, it was great to meet you.
Yeah, it was awesome.